your image into Photo Paint. You can either start in Coreldraw, of course, and then bring your image straight into Photo Paint, or you can acquire an image direct from Photo Paint. Up to File and down to Acquire Image and choose Acquire. This assumes that you have a scanner and software already connected. In my particular case, my scanning software looks like this, and the important thing is that I've chosen a 300 dpi resolution because we're scanning in a photograph. Now the other thing we're going to look at as well is scanning from actually a color negative, and you'll notice here the output resolution I've chosen is 2400 dpi. Now again, your scanning software may look very different to this, but the important factors are 300 dpi if we're scanning a photograph, or even higher, or if we're going to scan a negative like this, 2400 dpi or higher. Well, let's have a look at the end result. This first image is a scan of the actual photograph we received from the store, and this second image is the scan of the negative. Now, at first look, it definitely looks like the photograph is slightly more appealing, but actually it's quite underexposed, it's lacking in colour, and the skin tones and the colour of the sofa are really very incorrect. So the Photoshop, they've applied their own colour correction. But let's quickly have a look also at the tone curve. Notice the tone curve really from just past 50% all the way to the right hand side, which represents our highlights and our brighter areas of the photograph. There's really very little there. The shadowy area of our photograph is very rich in red tones, and again this is going to cause us problems with color correcting. If we go to our negative, up to adjust, and have a quick look at the tone curve, you'll notice it's very rich, a reasonably balanced tone curve, lacking a little in shadow and also lacking a little bit here in the highlights, and the combination of the two we would say it's lacking in contrast. But there's a lot more to work with here than there is in the other photograph. So for right now, this is the image we're going to work with. One last thing to quickly show you. If I zoom in on this eye right here, notice the white of the eye and the blue color and very, very fine pixels. Over to the other image. We'll just zoom in here. The white of the eye is a little grayer, the blue is somewhat unrealistic, and of course the pixels are a lot larger because we have scanned at 300 dpi. If you can afford to scan at higher resolutions on a photograph, I recommend 1200 dpi would be a good starting place to scan, but this is just average that we're looking at right here. So I'm going to work with the other image because I believe we're going to have a lot better result with this negative. So let's see what we can do. Whether you have scanned your image, imported from a CD, or someone has given you an image, always come up to Image and make sure you're in RGB mode. The majority of Photo Paint's filters work best in this mode, and you'll achieve your best results. When you're finished, you can simply convert to whatever mode you want. For example, CMYK if you're going to professional print. The first thing I will always do when I'm editing a photograph is crop away what we don't want. In this particular case, I'm going to select my crop tool, remove this edge and the little bit of blue just here. So I'll crop just inside, over to here, double click. Now that's less we have to work with and less we have to correct. The next thing I'll always do is come straight up to adjust and choose auto adjust. I don't always like the results of auto adjust, but in this case it has done a very good job. There's more contrast in the image, the skin tones are realistic, and of course I know the colour of this sofa, and that's actually a lot closer to the original colour. So that's a great starting point. Next, up to adjust and straight down to the Image Adjustment Lab. The first thing we'll notice here in Adjustment Lab is that the tone curve has been stretched, and that's what the auto adjust did, and that's why we have more contrast. We're still lacking a fair bit in this area here, so that's something for us to work on. In terms of my screen, I'm presently looking at a split screen scenario, or we could go to actually two photographs side by side. Let's have a quick look at split screen first. Every change we make we'll see on this particular side. So again, I want to increase this area here, so I'm simply going to up the brightness just a little, and you'll see it starts to move pixels over here. Let's increase the brightness a bit more, and again we'll increase the contrast just a little bit more as well. See the change beginning to take place. If If I go to the other screen, you can see a broader spectrum of change. So we're starting to move pixels over into this area. This is the mid-tone area, and what I'm going to do is move some of those pixels again to the brighter side. So you can see we're moving pixels over to the right. That doesn't look too bad, so I'm going to create a snapshot. So that's my first correction that I want to maintain and come back to and look at some point in time. I'm still going to brighten this a little and have a look at what that does. And the other thing I might consider doing as well here, let's just zoom back out, right click on my original, and in fact I'll zoom a bit more specifically. The other thing that we might look at doing here is adjusting the tonal color a little. I'm going to increase the tint to the green side, because what that will do is that'll interact with the magenta and the reds, etc., and create a little bit more of a tan type look. So I'm going to create a snapshot there. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit more just on the face. So if we increase the temperature to the warmer side, again that turns up the tan value. But here's an interesting thing. If we begin to desaturate these values and just pull out a little bit more until the hair just starts to lose some of that tan value, that to me looks a little bit more realistic. Now look at the curve. It's a little spaced, and we're getting close to posturizing the image, meaning that we've got gaps of pixels in our curve. We really do want a perfect curve with no gaps in the curves, but I think considering the strength of our resolution here, we'll probably be okay with this. And that's not too bad a looking curve. A better curve would be without those stripes in there. So let's create a snapshot of that, and then we'll have a quick look at our first one, and then our second. It's still not too bad, and the tone curve again is not too bad. The third one I think is more realistic, so I'm going to go with that one and click OK. So there you go. To me, the skin tone is more realistic because I know what he looks like. The tone colour in the couch is better, and of course the colour in the hair is also a lot better. What we need to do now is correct all of the flaws in the photograph, like dust and scratches, etc. There are a few tools at our disposal that will help us remove dust and scratch. One of those is if we come up to Image and down to Correction, we could choose Dust and Scratch, and that does a general remove of dust and scratch. The end result can be a slight defocusing of the image, so I'm going to do this a slightly different way, and we're going to look at the tools that we have available here under the Touch Up Tools flyout. We've got a couple. First of all, red eye removal. We've got some red eyes here. The clone tool, which we'll look at in another video, and the touch up brush tool. So first of all, let's go with the red eye removal tool, and we'll zoom in. Zoom in on these eyes here. Select the tool again. By default, the tolerance is 3, and you can experiment with what tolerance you want. But what's important is make sure your nib size is the same size as the red. If I put my finger on Shift, mouse click, keep my mouse down, I can actually resize the nib, as you can see there. So just want it to be that fraction bigger than the red area, and click, and again I'd shrink down just a little here, and I might need 2 clicks, 1 click and 2 clicks. Now even though you can see just that minute red glow, when you zoom back out you really can't see it. So go back to F4. You see it's brilliant the way it absolutely removes that. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at the touch up brush tool. Effectively, the touch-up brush tool works in very much the same way as the dust and scratch removal. What it does is it blurs pixels together. So let's zoom in a little bit here. I think that'll make life easier. If we zoom into this area here, and again I'll select the tool, you'll notice my nib right there. It's best to have your nib just fractionally larger than the spots you're trying to fix. By default, medium will be set, and we could go a little stronger, higher, because we've got such a high resolution. Now, as I click on a spot, 1 click, look at that, the spot is being removed. Isn't that absolutely brilliant? So what it's doing is it's taking all of the pixels inside of my nib area, and basically it's blurring them together. So the little white spots are being covered by the pixels around it because their color is being blurred into that spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to spend 2 or 3 minutes and just touch up all of those white spots everywhere that you can see. And isn't that just brilliant the way that actually works there? And I'll be back in a moment. I have spent around 3 minutes really just clicking on all of the little white dots in the photograph, and doesn't that now look like a much better image, one that I'd be happy to put into a frame right there. But what I'd like to do is show you a couple of other effects. In many ways that is my finished corrected photograph, but I do think we can do a lot more with this. Let's have a look at what else we could do. I'm going to have a little bit more fun using the same tool, the touch-up brush tool. We're going to use it in a very different way. Make sure your strength is on absolutely the highest strength, and we want to go up to a setting of, in my case, I'll go to a maximum nib setting of 500. Now I'm going to use this to absolutely blur the entire background. Just try and stay away from the edge of the subjects. If you go over a fraction, it's really not going to matter. And what this will do is, as we blur the background, it'll actually make our subjects appear more to the front, but also they'll simply become more the focus of the image. Now all I'm doing is doing a lot of clicking, and then I'll reduce the nib size, finger on the shift key, and just click and drag my mouse back. Now all I'm going to do is just quickly go around the outside of my image like that, and I'll just go ahead and finish this off. I'm just in the last phases. I'm just zoomed in quite close, as you can see, and I'm just going around that edge, and this has taken me almost a minute, not too long at all. And I'm fairly much done there. And F4, maximum zoom. What do you think of that effect? Now I actually think that looks really good. It's better than simply having that sofa in the background. One last thing I'd like to quickly show you, and it's a quick mask and change of the background. So if I select the Mask Tools flyout, and we're going to just select the Magic Wand Mask Tool. We want to be in additive mode, which means every time we add a mask, it becomes part of the entire mask. So click additive mode, go with the standard tolerance of 10. We're simply going to click, and you'll see the mask begin to appear. Now click close to your subjects, but don't actually click on your subjects. Now this is relatively easy to do. Now as you can see, we've picked up the face color there, so Control Z, I'll undo that, and we'll just try to make sure that we avoid that. We've got it again this time, and we might just lower our tolerance down a little, because what the Magic Wand Mask Tool does is it samples the color that you click on. Just undo that until the face is gone. It samples the color that you click on, and then it goes and looks for colors within the tolerance range, and then it will add those to the mask basically. And there we go, that's a bit better. Now we've got a number of holes in here, which is very easy to work with. We go up to Mask, come down to Mask, Outline, and Remove Holes. How are we looking? That looks fairly good. It's fairly tightly hugged. Now I am doing this very quickly for you, and usually if I was masking something I would probably spend a little bit more time, but I just want you to get the idea. I want to blur the mask just a little so that it doesn't affect our subjects. Up to Mask, Mask Outline, and Feather. I'll reduce the feather down to around about 10 pixels, and we'll run on average. Click OK. Now what I'm going to do is turn off the mask display. These two icons up here, this one here, display the mask. Now if I turn it off, the mask is still there, we just can't see it. It'll help me to see the effect. Now what will happen is, as I apply effects to this image, only the masked areas will be affected. The area inside or outside of our mask is not going to be affected. Okay, up to effects, and we're going to come down to art strokes, and I'll quickly have a look at, for example, the dabble option. Click dabble, and this will create an interesting looking effect on the background. And what I might do is go with Ice Cube as the default, and let's see what it does with that. Of course we're working with a high resolution image, so it can take a little while. Look how that has changed the background and dramatically changed the picture. So I'll click OK. You know what, as a final, what I would possibly consider doing in this scenario is cropping that little bit further. I'll crop my image, a little bit of the cat's white area there, and of course make sure that your subject is perfectly center of your image. Double click, and that's our end result. What do you think? I think that looks absolutely tremendous. Okay, well in our next video we're going to look at how to repair a highly damaged photograph.